Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the NPA conference. Tonight, we're very glad to welcome Anna Maxwell of Maxwellia, who is the founder and will be presenting to us this evening. Over to you, Anne.
Hi there. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Ashley, and thank you all for joining this seminar this evening. I'm Anna Maxwell, and I'm CEO of Maxwellia. And for the next 25 minutes or so, what I'd like to do is share with you my thoughts on the importance of switching to the future of pharmacy, give you an insight into the rigorous switch process that transitions prescription drugs to over-the-counter medicines, and also talk about the importance of the role of the pharmacist in switching to create sustainable new pharmacy categories. And also we've got a little bit of news to share with you as well, but more about that in a minute. But before I begin, let me give you a little background on my journey as a pharmacist so far. Next slide, please. I have dedicated my career to enabling people and pharmacists to help more people manage their health through widening access to medicines. I've spent 30 years working initially as a pharmacist and in the pharmaceutical industry. In my early career, I was an OTC buyer, and I worked on many of the early wave of switches in the late 80s and 90s, things like nicotine gum, the antihistamines, Imodium, etc. And this gave me a real insight into the really difficult innovation that switches are, and helped me understand what needs to get done to make switches both successful at a regulatory stage and also a commercial stage. My first pharmacy job was in the High Street Chemist, where I grew up in the Wirral. And there I saw firsthand how important and how central the local pharmacy is to the community in which it operates. And I see how pharmacy remains a very untapped healthcare resource, in particular for self-care. Next slide, please. So about 10 years ago, I noticed that innovation, in particular switch innovation, had actually reduced to a trickle. And as more and more products moved to general sales list, I felt that it meant that there were few opportunities for pharmacists to actually make interventions with people about their self-care. So I decided to do something about that. And I set up Maxwellia to address that problem. At Maxwellia, we want to make a real difference to people's lives by widening access to medicines and broaden the scope of what pharmacists can sell, so that people can actually can buy more things and treat themselves for more things, and pharmacists can recommend in more categories. So at Maxwellia, we're building a pipeline of new consumer healthcare brands by switching prescription drugs to make them more easily available for people to buy. So this means more drugs available as pharmacy medicines. Next slide, please. So healthcare, as we know, is going through a dramatic shift, and this has been driven faster by COVID-19. But even before then, it's been consumer driven, and there's been consumer driven demand for access to medicine and healthcare outside of the traditional GP route. COVID has actually forced consumers to reevaluate their health and their reliance on GPs and the NHS, and it is encouraging independence and self-care, which is actually resulting in a potential change of mindset in people. So pharmacists have become even more instrumental in helping people with the shift to self-care. And we see pharmacy as the logical front door to the NHS. Next slide, please. So Maxwellia is a purpose-built and dedicated British pharma team backed by the British Business Bank, Innovate UK, and other investors. Our focus is on switching, the gold standard of innovation in OTC healthcare, and we're looking at the future, developing new categories to help manage important health conditions and bring more people into the pharmacy. And where appropriate, we will combine technology with our medicine offer. It's not just about the pill. So widening access gives pharmacy greater power as a trusted healthcare professional to supply what's been traditionally prescription-only medicines. And this is fundamental to help create a sustainable pharmacy model and future-proof the NHS. It also will encourage earlier intervention through greater awareness that can't be offered by prescription medicines. Next slide, please. So switching is seen as a real game changer in over-the-counter medicines innovation. Well, why? Well, first of all, it makes the medicine more widely available, so it can be made available in more places for people to buy it. Because we can advertise, it helps people understand that they actually have a condition and they can treat themselves. and it also encourages pharmacists to recommend it. Next slide, please. These are some examples, some very famous examples of brands that have grown in pharmacy that are actually switches. So many of today's big brands are actually switches. And we at Maxwellia believe that switch is a huge opportunity for the OTC category. At the moment, the market in the UK is worth around 2.6 billion. And I believe if we could actually switch what is available to be switched, then potentially we can add another £1 billion to that market by 2030. And so there's a huge market to play for. These are some examples in terms of some brand sizes of those brands that I mentioned. There's some pretty big players that have been previously switched. And what happens when a brand switches is that markets either are created or they grow and step change. And one of the key things about switching is you can actually advertise the product and make it available for people so that they become aware of the product and the condition. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, we need to skip along a couple of slides. Got out of sync. Thank you, thank you. There's no big secret around which products are available for switching or would be suitable candidates for switching. And this is a chart that was produced by the World Self-Medication Industry in 2019. And I think it makes really interesting reading. But I think 2009, I'm sorry, but it makes really interesting reading. And I think, there's really little progress that has been made in terms of the amount of products that have been switched on this list. And this is something that Maxwellia is set to change. Next slide, please. So I'd like to move on to just giving you an insight of how you can plan a switch. And this is a really great photograph of a deconstructed Formula One racing car, which resides at Brooklands Museum here in Surrey. There are thousands of components that actually go into making a switch. It's a very precise initiative, and each of the components has its place, and the whole product needs to be brought together in a particular way so that everything works smoothly. And it's actually a very intricate and precision type of initiative. Next slide, please. So Maxwellia we're building a pipeline, and we've created an incubator that actually enables us to build switches, multiple switches in parallel. And we at the moment have a number of projects undergoing assessment with the MHRA. And I'm thrilled to tell you that today, the first one of those, our contraceptive pill, Levima, has been approved. So it's quite a momentous day for us today. So if we actually look at the center of this wheel, preparing a switch is actually a huge task. You have to create a very large dossier, and the components of that comprise regulatory aspects, clinical aspects, marketing aspects. We talk to key opinion leaders. We have to obviously align ourselves with a license holder so that we can actually manufacture the product. And that is an extremely intricate piece of work that is done to create a huge dossier for the MHRA. And at Maxwellia, we put the consumer at the heart of the process, and we design and build the new brand together alongside the regulatory aspects of what needs to be done, so that we can actually create brands that people will help people look after themselves and ensure that they are successful at the regulatory stage, but also at the commercial stage too. Next slide, please. So the MHRA are the regulator for the UK, and the process. If I talk a little bit about the process, it's actually product based. So that means that you can have the same ingredient with different classifications. So ibuprofen is a very good example of this, where you can have POM, P, and GSL existing with different product licenses for different indication strengths and pack size limits. And so in order to switch, we work very closely with the MHRA in a rigorous process, which is driven by the company, that actually includes, we have to demonstrate that a person can safely be selected to receive a medicine if it's appropriate. And if it's not appropriate, that we identify that those people are not suitable, and then when to refer in case of a pharmacy medicine with the help of a pharmacist. We also have to work to create high-level pharmacy training materials to give confidence to pharmacists to recommend. And we obviously ensure that there's a trusted supply chain to make sure that the product is on sale and available for the people who need it. So if we look at the MHRA in a little bit more detail and what they are looking to achieve, if I could have the next slide, please. Essentially, the MHRA are looking at the 4 POM criteria. And I'm sure that some of you will remember these from your studying days as a pharmacist. And this is the bar that we have to meet when we are looking at switching. So essentially, if any of these criteria are met, then a product is not suitable for switching. So if we can go through these in detail, if we look at the last one, so POM criteria number 4 is actually if a product is normally prescribed by a doctor or is administered parentally, then it wouldn't be suitable for switch. So that's quite an easy one. In terms of number 3, that's all around whether or not there's sufficient information about the product. So it needs to have been on the market as a prescription drug for quite some time before the regulator would be confident about even considering for switch. And usually, I mean, I think that usually that would be a minimum of 5 years on the market as a POM before it would be suitable for a switch. Next one, number 2, is where the frequently and to a very wide extent used incorrectly, and as a result are likely to present a direct or indirect danger to human health. So this is all about misuse and whether or not it's actually going to be misused, and if so, is that going to be a problem? And then the biggest one is the first one, where we're likely to present a danger either directly or indirectly, even when used correctly, if used without medical supervision. And this is basically where the contraindications, the side effects, the warnings are studied. And therefore we have to justify that in the case of a pharmacy medicine, the prescription criteria are not met. So this is all put together in a very large dossier that actually looks at the clinical, the regulatory, and the pharmacy aspects. And we talk to numerous stakeholders, including pharmacists and medics and consultants, to actually ensure that we can justify a position for non-prescription status. If I could have the next slide, please. So as well as looking at the POM criteria, we also have to give details to the MHRA around how we're going to manage risk. And this comes in a number of formats. So we look at the label, we look at the patient information leaflet. These are sometimes user tested. So patient information leaflet would be actually tested with the user to make sure that they can actually read and understand the information that is provided within that. Maxwellia, we've pioneered something called an active pack, and this is where all the information that is required to actually supply a product in terms of the supply protocol, we try very hard to actually get that onto the back of the pack, so that if you were confronted with somebody who was asking for the product, then actually the prompts are all on the back of the pack, and that's something that we strive to do as a Maxwellia product. From a risk management plan perspective, one of the key things within Switch is how we manage risk, and this is why education and training for pharmacists is really, really important. And you'll see that certainly with our new Switch Lavima, the training materials we have created are very important for pharmacists to actually undertake and look at, so that you can familiarize yourselves with the criteria that have been agreed for supplying to the consumer in the over-the-counter setting. In some instances, the marketing, the MHRA will ask us to do studies. So this could be a post-marketing authorization study, whereby the MHRA will check that the pharmacist and the consumer are actually receiving the information that is required, and the consultation is happening in the way that the MHRA had hoped. So risk management materials comprise a number of criteria, but what I would say is all of these actually go through the MHRA and are rigorously vetted. So every word and every sentence is actually agreed and approved by the MHRA. So anything that you see associated with switch has not only been approved by the industry regulatory body, the PAGB, but also it has been approved by the MHRA word for word. And that's something that's very, very time consuming part of a switch. And also in the case of some of our training materials, they've been accredited by the NPA as well. If I could have the next slide, please. So just a word on what actually happens at the MHRA. So it will take Maxwellia around 3 to 6 months to actually prepare a dossier that would be suitable for putting the product and making a proposal to switch a drug. That's a meticulous amount of work, which does involve discussion with the MHRA. So before we make a submission, we talk to them about whether or not it's feasible to make the switch and what a supply protocol might look like in the pharmacy setting. Once we've compiled our dossier, we've produced all our dossier, the label, the leaflet, the pack, the training materials. All of that goes into the MHRA, and the process of assessment begins. And in their instance, they have a clinical, pharmacist, and regulatory assessment team who basically look at the information that is supplied, and if they're comfortable with it, it would then proceed to the next stage. That is where they actually then talk to stakeholder groups. Now, bear in mind, we as a pharma company putting a switch together would already have talked to stakeholder groups, but MHRA talk to stakeholder groups independently, who will include members of the Pharmaceutical Society, expert groups like the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the Faculty of Sexual and Reproductive Health. They would actually talk to all of them. And then they pull together, once they have got a view from the stakeholder groups, if it's a go to the next stage, then they will involve relevant expert groups. So in the case of a women's health product, it will be the Women's Expert Advisory Group, who will have eminent experts who are able to comment upon the validity of the switch in terms of the pharmacy supply model and how it's being put together. Once that's done, again, if there's a green light and there is agreement for this to approve, eventually it gets to the CHM. So that's the Committee for Human Medicine. So the people who have been approving the vaccines are exactly the same people who actually have the final jurisdiction on whether or not a product can be reclassified from prescription to non-prescription status. So it's very, very high bar. It's not a case of just writing, a letter. There is a lot of information that is actually provided, and a lot of discussion, and many experts are involved in this type of decision. Once the CHM have approved the go ahead, then in the case of major reclassifications, then there is likely to be a public consultation, as we saw with the Levima product consultation that actually happened in February earlier this year. Once that is through, that's a 6-week process. The results are assimilated, and then the switch is recommended for approval or not, and the minister then signs off. And once that's done, then there is a report of all the findings and all the decision making that is actually published, so you can actually get those on in the public domain. Next slide, please. So Maxwellia, as I said earlier, have a number of applications within the MHRA at the moment. So we're building a pipeline of new switches, which will actually take pharmacy beyond the traditional categories of cough, cold and pain, and skincare and digestive health. we're looking to actually create a whole series of new groundbreaking categories. And we have 3 products in the MHRA at the moment. And I'm thrilled to say that today we received notification that actually Levima, our desogestrel, the contraceptive progesterone pill, will be launched this summer. So we literally press the button, the stock is on its way. And I'm thrilled that after many years of innovation and development and work at Maxwellia, we're finally able to launch our first product. So I'm pretty thrilled about that. And thank you for being with me here today. I have got a little bit of information on the Maxwellia new product to share with you in the last few minutes. If I could have the next slide, please. I have written a book about switching, so if anybody's interested, I'd be really happy to send you a copy of it. Please email me on my email address, anna@maxwellia.com. It gives an insight into some case histories. It tells you how we actually go about switching a drug in the here in the UK, and gives a little bit of insight into our process. It was peer reviewed by the Pharmaceutical Journal some time ago and recommended as preferred reading. So that's really great. If I can just move on to the next slide. So I'm really thrilled to be able to share with you a little bit of insight into our first product, the pill. It's Levima, which is a desogestrel contraceptive pill. This is the first time anybody will have seen any of our marketing communications. So again, I'm thrilled that we are able to share this with some colleagues, and I'm really thrilled to be here on this. Next slide, please. So in terms of the opportunity, 37% of women, even before COVID, said that they were unable to access the contraceptive services they need. And actually, COVID has made things even worse. 70% of women say that it's very difficult to, they believe that contraception should be much easier to get hold of, and half of women find it very difficult to actually access. They think it's inconvenient, and they would prefer to have other options rather than getting it from their GP. And I think really interestingly, over half of, or nearly half of pregnancies in the UK are unplanned. This actually cost the NHS 240 million pounds per annum. And COVID has actually made the whole kind of situation more worse. And therefore, it's really a great opportunity now for us to be able to bring the contraceptive pill to pharmacy. And 44% of women that we surveyed during COVID have actually said that they'd be willing to pay for their pill. The economics for pharmacy are great. It's far more profitable for you to recommend a product such as Levima than it is even to dispense it. And so there's a real economic argument for pharmacy as well. And we're creating a new high value category as a result of this. If I could have the next slide, please. So in terms of, we believe, based upon if 7.2% of prescriptions actually switch to consumer healthcare, then £29 million worth of business will be generated for pharmacy as a completely new category next year. So this is a really, really great opportunity for pharmacy that we're bringing. And that's the opportunity, that the size of the prize for year one, in terms of what we believe the contraceptive category can deliver for pharmacy. Next slide, please. So it's just in terms of the products, desogestrel, over half the prescriptions in the UK are now prescribed as desogestrel. It's a extremely safe option. It can be used in breastfeeding. There's no blood pressure requirement, although if you want to offer it, then that's part of that can be done as part of a health check. It is for women of all childbearing age, and first supply you can supply up to 3 months, and after in a repeat you can supply up to 12 months. Women under 18 years, it's limited to 3 month supply. but it's a real testament, I think, to the safety of the drug that MHRA have enabled us to make it available for women of childbearing age. Next slide, please. So this just gives an idea of how potentially big, if you have a business in emergency hormonal contraception in your pharmacy, then that's 5% of the contraceptive market in terms of how much people are using that particular type of contraception. And you can see that the pill is 32%. So the potential for this category is 6 times more than that of EHC. And that's why we're really, really excited about it. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier about risk management and the tools that are important. Very important is training. You will be receiving next week some materials for the launch of Levima. So you'll be receiving a training guide and also an optional checklist that you can use to get yourself comfortable with the pharmacy supply protocol. But what I would say is that the pack itself actually has the prompts that you need to actually be able to supply the product safely to a woman who presents. So please look out for the training. It's really important that you familiarize yourselves with it. The fact that MHRA have made this product available is testament to how they believe that pharmacy can really suitably provide a level of care to the woman that is equivalent or better than that they would get from the GP. We're really keen to deliver the support to you of what you need. And if there's things that you need, then please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And not only will you receive information in print versions, you'll also receive it digitally via the CIG network. We have our training is also on the CIG network, plus also we have an e-learning center on our website, which will actually be going live tomorrow. Next slide, please. I'm conscious of time, so if anybody has any questions, then please let me know. But thank you very much for listening, and good luck with Levima. We really thank you very much in advance for your support.
Great, thank you very much for that, Anna. Very interesting. I do have one of our regular attendees, Graham Phillips. I'm not sure whether he would like to put a question to you. I've just see if he would like to do that. Graham, are you available?
Hiya.
Hi there, Graham. Would you
Hey,
like
Graham.
Hi, Anna. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
Yeah, good. So, first of all, congratulations, because Switch has been kind of dead for many years, and so to pick it up and run with it, you know, all power to Albert, and thanks, because I agree with you. There's a huge opportunity here that, for whatever reason, has got, you know, lost along the way. The broader question, I guess, is the concern we always have as pharmacists is we put all this effort into showing how safe and effective these products are, only to find them switched to GSL. So number one, are these going to inevitably all end up as GSL? And number two, do you think there's a case for a super P category like they have in Australia?
To answer your second question first, no, I don't think there's a case for super P, because I think P actually provides the framework that enables us to be able to transition products from prescription to non-prescription status. I would suggest that it will be a very long time before the oral contraceptive pill would be eligible to go for general sale. The MHRA and the way in which the pharmacy supply protocol has been set up is that it is absolutely paramount that the pharmacist is involved in the consultation, so that the level of care for the woman can be as good as, if not better than they would receive from the GP. And I think that would be really quite a challenge to overcome, to knock that out from a GSL point of view. We would have to prove, to move something to GSL, you'd have to prove that the pharmacist was not important in that whole process. And in the case of the contraceptive pill, I think it would be a long time before that would happen. And I think that with more complex switches now, I mean, we're tackling some pretty complex ones. And again, the pharmacist is very important within that category. So I think that certainly from a Maxwellia point of view, the pharmacist is pivotal in those types of initiatives.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that. I know we bang on time at the moment, and we do have our next session starting in half an hour. So thank you very much, Anna, for joining us. Really appreciate that. If anyone does have any further questions, please do email events@npa.co.uk and we will pass those through to Anna. And again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Bye-bye.